Welcome to Clotheshorse, the podcast that has totally lost its sense of taste and smell. And it's very, very sad as a person who enjoys food. I'm your host, Amanda. I'm a little hoarse, and this is episode 128. I feel like as I'm saying this, I missed a joke, a pun, something there, an opportunity to say horse, Clotheshorse. I have no idea. Anyway, I'm going to start by admitting that this episode was extremely difficult to put together. Like maybe one of the most disaster-filled projects I've worked on for a long time. First off, the timeline was really challenging, but it seemed like it could happen. Then, of course, I got COVID. I still wanted to fulfill my commitment to create this episode because I'm a person of my word, perhaps to a fault, so I proceeded forward. I totally had a fever when I recorded the conversation you're going to hear today, but fortunately, I didn't sound as stupid on the re-listen as I felt during the actual recording, so that worked out well, and good to know that, even with a fever, I can, make it work. There were tons of technical issues with the actual recording and some other technical issues with the other pieces. But ultimately, here it is, less than 12 hours before my flight leaves for Mexico City, exactly how I did not want this to go. I'm finishing this episode when I should be packing. And I will also be breaking my promise to myself that I wouldn't work on this vacation, because I will be by mixing, uploading, etc. when we get to the hotel. I've learned a lot of valuable lessons about myself this week, that's for sure. But despite all of the technical issues and headaches and everything else that has gone into this, I'm really excited for you to hear today's episode because there are some great ideas, some great conversations, and some great people. Today you'll meet Laura, a designer and founder of the Reworked Circular Design Summit, which is happening in New York City this June. After you meet her, we're going to roll right into a conversation between myself and some of the incredible people participating in Reworked. You're going to meet Carmen Gama, the director of circular design at Eileen Fisher and co-founder of Make Anew. You'll meet Crystal Lee Early and Natalie Mumford of Three Women, a sustainable fashion brand located in Long Beach, California, and Lacie Thorne, founder of Fidgetals, a fashion resale platform that incentivizes brands and consumers into the circular economy. We're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff, including upcycling, resale, take-back programs, and the value of a secondhand first way of life. I want to be clear that this is not sponsored content, it goes without saying, but I saw it as an opportunity to give more exposure to some really rad people working very hard in this space and all the cool things that they are doing. So let's get going with an intro from Laura.
Hey there, my name is Laura. I am a women's wear and textile designer and consultant. I make things with people and planet at the front of mind. When I was a student, I didn't fit in. I didn't really have a good context of how I could fit fashion in the world I was in New York, into who I was. So I left, I took a year off and backpacked, mostly in India and Southeast Asia. And the first time that I felt like things were right was actually when I got lost in the mountains of northern Thailand and ended up at a woman's home I just met, hanging out with her and her family. It ended up being for 3 days, and we just knitted and crocheted, going back and forth on ideas. And that's when it really all clicked for me that, this feels right. This is the capacity. This is the relationship that I want to have with fashion. And I knew that the world would be a cool place if people like this woman were able to continue doing what they were doing, having craft intertwined with their daily lives, living in natural settings, connected with their creative practice. So, that was my relationship with fashion. And I would eventually go on to start a women's wear line where I built a supply chain system with artisans at the heart of it. I would live for about 8 years. I lived half of each year in India, part of in Peru, hanging out at the loom on the floors of many friends' homes, going back and forth of design and technique experiments. And I eventually figured out a way to start my small women's wear line, presenting my first collection got my first wholesale order from Oak. And it was small, but lucky for me, that's what small for our industry actually meant a whole lot for the artisans that I was working with. So we were able to start that way. And as seasons went on, our orders grew and continued to grow to a point where several of the artisan communities I worked with ended up fulfilling some of their dreams, expanding to build workshops so they no longer had to work inside their homes and were able to employ other artisans or buy a car or marry off a son, build a livelihood for their families. So at that point, the supply chain was really beautiful, and what was going on that end was cool. But there was something going on that I wasn't totally conscious to at the time. And 7 or 8 years later, I woke up and realized that I had focused so much time looking at the system of my supply chain and designing a really cool thing on that end of things. But the rest of my business model was so traditional, so archaic, and just truly built into the fashion system. I sold wholesale to retailers, followed the fashion calendar, showed 100 styles a season at trade show. And what I eventually realized was that because I had neglected to apply the same principles that I had applied to my life and the world with the artisans to the fashion system I was participating in, there was a big problem on many levels, especially with the artisans. Even though we saw a lot of growth within communities I worked with, there were still problems. My intention was to collaborate with each group and hopefully sustain and grow my orders with each and every one of them long term. And as it turned out, that was not possible to do all the time. So really, I realized that by participating in that system, I handed over the power to, in some instances, to a single buyer at a department store to decide what the life of a single family would be for that year, what their livelihood would look like. So, my main takeaway from that was, okay, apply your values that you feel so connected and strong to absolutely everything that you do. Because had I done that, I could have avoided this tough learning. And at that point, I decided to stop producing new collections, and I've kind of been on this journey since, trying to figure out how I can do things the right way. And part of that journey was actually attending a summit at the UN, followed by partnering with Carrie Bannigan and the United Nations Conscious Fashion Campaign. On an event, we organized a single day at Soho House, also with dear friend Sarah Wright. And we brought together a small group of people for a single panel conversation with some pretty inspirational humans. And something that was obvious that day was the energy in the room and the power that bringing people together has. It also was cool to see people leave the room and engage in this conversation and with the companies that they worked for, who hadn't engaged in these conversations before, and seeing actions being taken. And that played a large role in inspiring these 2 days. But also the other thing to note is, I've just been asking myself, especially over these last few years, a lot of questions on how to do this right. And as an individual person working on this for, more than a decade, I don't have the solutions. These last few years, we've all had time to pause and slow down. And one of the things that I realized is, somebody who spent the last more than a decade trying to figure out how to do the right thing, I haven't figured it out. And I know that I've learned just one little sliver of the bigger picture. And I also know that there's other people that are working on their own piece of the bigger picture, So we have so much to learn from each other, and not only that, so much to gain in our aligned purpose by bringing some of these minds together, who are really, a lot of them, they are all thought leaders and change makers in their own right. So, some of us are working on challenges that maybe someone else in the room has already addressed, or there might be a bunch of us working on the same challenges as each other, where the solution lies in us coming together. So my thought was that I have to figure out how to bring all these minds that are working on their own area of circularity and their own area of trying to do the right thing together into one space to try to figure this out together. So that's what these 2 days are about at Rework Circular Design Summit. After the event, we actually also have a mission to bring this conversation into more people's hands. We want to engage with others in the conversation and see where we can provide support by bridging connections in the industry, and we'll be doing that through a matchmaking program. In that matchmaking program, we will be inviting you to apply, share some information, and we're going to be forming various types of groups, whether that's through just a simple introduction, which will be made by, finding two individuals that if introduced, if they have the potential to form a partnership that could help to propel circularity forward, we will form that introduction. Another one is a mentorship matchmaking program, and the last one is a potential, there speaks of forming some collaboratives, so bringing people together in groups that could help to drive solutions forward. So we will be sharing that information on our Instagram page at Reworked Summit eventually, and so stay tuned there. And if you're interested in partaking in that program, please apply. We would like to get as many individuals that are interested in participating involved.
So why don't you all go around and introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lacie. I'm an executive MBA candidate at the Yale School of Management with a focus on sustainability. And my background is a 15-year career in New York and Hong Kong, working in fast fashion and then luxury fashion as a designer and an artistic director, primarily for big box stores where I launched celebrity clothing brands like Jennifer Lopez for Kohl's, Nicki Minaj for Sears, and Adam Levine for Kmart.
Wow, I had no idea Nicki Minaj did a collection for Sears. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, in fact, it was like 2013, 2014.
Wow. And what do you do now?
So based on some of the things that I witnessed in the fashion manufacturing industry, I was called to pivot my career into sustainability. So I'm now working for my own Web3 startup where we incentivize fashion resale using blockchain technology.
Amazing.
Nice.
Quite a career shift.
Yeah. I've seen things.
I think everybody in this pretend virtual room has seen some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who wants to go next?
Hi there. I'm Crystal from Three Women.
I'm Natalie from Three Women.
And I guess Natalie and I have a kind of organic relationship, a natural relationship with repurposing vintage or just wearing vintage. For me, I grew up shopping at the thrift store in order to, showcase my style and express myself. It's also what was available to me as somebody growing up with a single mom and not a lot of money. And so that grew into just a love for vintage and resold and still for a very long time. It's been like, 20 years or something. And Natalie, and that's actually how Natalie and I met, is selling vintage on the flea market circuit. So we met selling vintage. And then when I started Three Women, after a long career kind of working in government, I asked her to join. And at that point, I had no idea really what that meant. It's just something that I knew I always wanted to have a shop, and vintage is what I knew. So making clothes from vintage textiles really came naturally. But Nat, do you want to speak more on how we met?
Yeah, so I have a science background. I was going to school for biology and always also selling on the side. Grew up going to thrift stores, so we had similar upbringings in that sense. And yeah, when we met at the flea markets, we started, selling together. And then when she got the opportunity to get the shop, I was happy to jump on board and just focus on my creative opportunities. From being in science, it was like I was almost tapped out. So Yeah, and then the shop opened. We were selling vintage first, and then soon after, in the same year, this is 2018, in downtown Long Beach, Crystal decided to make our first piece.
Right. And then our first piece was made from, my family had a Chinese frozen food business in Windsor, Ontario, Canada in the 1950s. So there were rice bags that were branded from Dragon Foods. And I made a couple jackets, and that's kind of what started it all.
Amazing.
Cool.
I've totally been in your store in Long Beach.
Really?
No way.
Yeah, a long time ago, but yes.
Cool.
That's awesome. Thank
amazing.
you.
I used to come to a trade show there pretty frequently at the convention center, and which I think that trade show is defunct now. I think that it was dying, and then the pandemic sort of just like killed it completely. But there's like not a lot to do within walking distance of the convention center.
But there actually is. There's a whole city, the largest shopping district in Long Beach called the East Village Arts District, where our shop and our studio space is located. But it's just, there's not any marketing really from the hotels or even really the city of Long Beach, because people stumble upon our neighborhood all the time, which is really diverse. A lot of women-owned businesses, tons of just unique businesses. Some that have been thriving for a long time, and some that are new.
Yeah, and a really beautiful Art Deco neighborhood. Like
it is. It's really beautiful. It's like when you stay in the hotel at the convention center, all you see is this horrible complex of like a Forever 21 outlet and Hooters.
Right.
Right.
But then you just walk. If you just have to know, when I travel and I'm somewhere I haven't been before, I was just going to Google Maps and type in vintage and see what comes up. And that's how I ended up over there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Well, we've also been joined now by Carmen.
Okay, well, hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Carmen Gama. I'm the Director of Circular Design at Eileen Fisher, and I'm also the co-founder of Make a New, which is a B2B circular design platform that enables companies to be part of the circular economy.
Cool. Awesome. I'm sure everyone here loves Eileen Fisher.
Yes.
I know I do. Yeah. Like really inspiring. So that's a transition into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was like our individual journeys from, working in fashion or working in government or working in science to working in the sustainable fashion, slow fashion movement. Because I think one of the ways that we can make slow fashion more accessible to more people is to show that there are real life experiences that lead us there. And when other people hear those stories, it makes them feel more welcome, and they can see themselves in those stories and say, oh, you're right. Like, I am going to stop shopping at Shein, right? So does anybody want to start first sharing their journey?
I can talk to it a bit.
Okay.
So I was the first person hired for the Jennifer Lopez brand for Kohl's, and I would fly over to Hollywood, go into the artist's home and speak with Jennifer and her team about the aesthetic of the line, talk about colors and aesthetics and silhouettes, but then immediately juxtapose that very glamorous experience with flying to our manufacturing facilities in mainland China. And I remember being in the factory where we were producing a unit order of 60,000 pairs of neon pink jeans for the Jennifer Lopez collection. And I saw so many pairs of neon pink jeans, like the concept of pants just like stopped making sense in my mind. Like it was neon pink jeans everywhere, right? At different stages of completion. And it was this light bulb moment for me because it was one style in one brand in a store that had many brands in a world that had many stores. And it was just like, oh my God, I cannot believe that we are using our resources to create these super ugly, very cheap pants that people are going to wear like twice and then donate them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you were talking about that, that's what I was immediately picturing as the end of life for these neon pink pants, and it would be a very short-lived life because there's not a lot of even utility in a pair of neon
Exactly.
pink jeans.
And like we were selling them for like $19 and then they were going to donate them, right? So when I had the chance to move to Hong Kong, I got my third celebrity line launched like the day that I moved, and I was like, I'm done, I'm out. And I moved to Hong Kong and started working in luxury fashion that had a better margin for better quality, right? Like nobody's throwing away like a Dior jacket. There's some level of second life value in that. But who can afford a closet full of designer goods? Nor would you want to, maybe, right? So yeah, when I came back to the States after 5 years in Hong Kong, I became a professor at a local university and started talking about fashion sustainability. And that's when I came upon the MBA at Yale, where we kind of studied the business case for circular initiatives.
I mean, I love that the story included hot pink jeans. I think that's where a lot of stories begin, at least in a figurative sense, with those hot pink jeans. I had a similar experience. It wasn't actually my company's product that pushed me over the edge, but I was sitting in the window of my office in downtown LA, and I was like, I don't know, on the 7th or 8th floor, and I could look across the street where there was another building. It was a really weird building where like there was a place on the bottom that was like men pay to dance with women, that kind of thing. And then above it, every floor was women sewing. And it was August. It was in the high 90s in downtown LA. I was sitting in my air conditioned office and I could see the windows were open in that building because there was no air conditioning. And people were literally drenched with sweat in there sewing all day. And at the end of the day, I looked out and I just saw rack after rack after rack of these like one shoulder red bandage dresses going out the door, just like one after another. And once again, something that is going to have such little utility in someone's life, that is going to be worn so little, and creating it was a miserable experience. So what's the value add of something like that in the world, much like some hot pink jeans?
Right? I mean, what's interesting to me is that when we look at fashion resale websites like Poshmark, RealReal, Depop, that article of clothing might change hands multiple times. Like that platform might sell the same article of clothing more than once. But because the brand is not incorporated into that profit margin, brands are incentivized to create the lowest quality, cheapest garment that they can so that customers keep coming back to their source, right? Create something that is trendy and low quality, customer throws it out, then they come back to the traditional retail transaction because that's where brands get their profit.
Yeah. And if I can say something in regards of that, it's like I've been in this world of, take back programs and, resale and like, finding solutions for like our damaged inventory that we can, resell. But now, like lately, as I'm thinking more, and how in April there was like a boom of like brands opening their resale programs, right? But really what I'm thinking is like having a resale program does not make you circular, nor makes you sustainable, especially if you're out, if you're, for example, if you're a company that you're going to, another service provider say like, you deal with my resale program and I just want the profits from it. I don't see that being, sustainable or like you're becoming circular. I think the actual thing that makes you circular or towards, really making a change in this industry is you having a take back program and you're responsible for every single garment that comes back to you. And yes, the resale is actually another revenue stream for the company, right? And right now there's no real data that is proving that one resale item is substituting for a new one. There's no data on that, nor I think that we are there yet. But it's actually, what are you doing with all of the other garments that you cannot resell? Are you putting them back into your system to create new garments? So that might be replacing a percentage of your new line with materials that you actually are recollecting and reusing. So I'm like beginning to stay in this like state of mind of like, what does that resale, really brings to our industry?
Right.
Yeah, and I think Patagonia does that. Do they not? They take back their gear and they resell it, or they remake it?
So Patagonia does have like a take back program, but they do not take back everything, right? They only take like slightly flawed garments that they can repair, I think, under some of their stores. But for example, our Eileen Fisher, we literally take back everything. It can be a sock, just one sock with a huge hole, or it can be like a brand new cashmere sweater that our customer no longer wanted, and we give them a $5, like coupon that they can redeem at the store. Okay. And then we resell what we can and what we cannot resell because it's like beyond wear. We have a couple of solutions for them, but it's a model that requires a lot of resources, logistics, knowledge. So that's why not everybody's doing it on their own. They're actually going through other service providers to actually do that for them.
Right. Yeah, we're obviously on a way smaller scale, but we've been around doing this since 2018, and now we're starting to get some people reach out about repairs. And we have a skilled seamstress that is like, can do repairs in an excellent way. So yeah, we take everything back. If anyone reaches out, I'm like, yes, please send me photos. We'll like either use another similar textile to replace it or just repair it. And I think that's going to probably continue. And if, we do get bigger, then it's going to be like a separate program, a part of our business.
Right. But we're already very, very sustainable in that, we do a lot of custom clothing. So we know people are really invested, at least sentimentally and also, creatively, they're invested in it. So,
it's meant to be a garment you pass down to your children and so on. So something you get to have forever because these textiles have already lasted, some over 100 years.
Right. That's what I love about thrift store shopping is that if you are buying something secondhand, you know that there is at least a baseline level of quality there, that it's not going to like immediately disintegrate upon the first wash.
True.
Yeah, you could tell.
Very true. As you all were talking, I started to think about I've been calling the fast fashionification of resale and secondarily take back programs. So, Carmen touched on how there isn't really a lot of profit to be made in secondhand, or at least take back and upcycling and true circularity for fast fashion. Right. And so how they've been kind of diversifying their revenue streams is by creating resale platforms. So recently, I want to say about 6 months ago, URBN, the parent company of Urban Outfitters, Free People, Anthropologie, they launched a resale platform called Newly Thrift. And what struck me as most troubling to me, or maybe not even most troubling, most transparently, obviously, not a commitment to circularity, is one of the ways sellers could be paid is by taking a slightly larger payment in store credit for one of their 3 brands.
Wow.
And that just felt so transparently like we need to sell a lot more cheap new clothes.
Yeah.
I was wondering I know you all have very strong feelings probably about resale, but Lacie, like starting with you, like how do you talk to people about these kinds of platforms and educate them about the reality of them?
So, in an environment where the environmental impact of fast fashion is so devastating to the planet, right? So what we're seeing right now, the carbon emissions associated with the global fashion industry are responsible for up to 10% of annual global carbon emissions. And that's more than international flights and shipping combined, okay? So even if we are making initiatives into a circularity space that aren't perfect, we're at least trying, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say that, just because something hasn't solved the problem yet, that we need to like condemn the initiative, right? So, but in general, when we have garments that have ended their use cycle for the first generation user, the first person who has purchased it, they have a couple of options, right? So you can donate it. But what is crazy with the donation cycle, supply so far outpaces demand. Only 15% of donated clothes are actually recirculated into the American economy. 85% of clothing donations in the United States are offshored to places like Ghana and Chile, where we have completely decimated their textile and apparel industry with these very low cost secondhand goods. But even there, supply so far outpaces demand that we end up seeing literal mountains and deserts of discarded clothing. So if you Google Chile's Atacama Desert or Accra, Ghana, there's so much secondhand clothing there that you can see pictures of the waste. So when we talk about fashion resale services, there is data that shows that a garment purchased secondhand effectively eliminates about 86% of the carbon emissions associated with new product manufacturing, right? Has there been data that associates that this is reducing consumer demand, or that, brands are identifying this as a new revenue stream and therefore are reducing the total amount? We're not there yet.
No, definitely not.
But it's better than throwing it away, and it's better than donating it, right? So we're gonna talk about secondhand platforms for brands in a positive light as much as we can. And so there's a couple of platforms out there. So Trove is the one that oversees the buyback programs like Patagonia. There's a new one called Treat that is really interesting. And effectively, and of course, Digitals, which is mine, I think is the best. But basically what we're trying to do is bring brands into the profit loop so that there is some level of incentivization for these clothing companies to stop creating garbage of clothing. So
no, it's
right,
true.
If you can sell the same thing multiple times and get a profit margin off of that, we know as designers that there's an element of incentivization there. So I think that it's a good start.
I do think it's a good start, although I do worry that people overconsume secondhand a little bit too right now, and we need to shift our habits across the board. I'm sorry, I cut you off, I think, Carmen.
First, I actually have a clarifying note. Actually for us, our resale model is pretty profitable, right? For Eileen Fisher. And I don't think I meant to say that resale is not profitable. I think resale, it's like a new revenue stream for brands, right? But I think that resale is a really good way for changing consumer behavior. The more customers are jumping into resale, like buying resale items, right? They're going to get into this habit of I can start returning my garments back to, either the clothing brand that I bought from or other, reverse logistics companies. So that is going to bring back, that's going to save a lot of garments going straight to the landfill, right? And I know what you were saying, Lacie, 15% of the garments only get resold and the rest goes to third world countries. I mean, I'm from Mexico. I was born and raised there. So whenever I went shopping, I would love shopping in these huge mountains of clothing that were coming basically from the United States, right? So I think resale, it's just more that we are right now, we at Eileen Fisher, we work with Trove, right? They support all of our renew.com website. And we also work with Tersus, who does all of our sortation and cleaning, right? So we have all of these different partners that they're supporting our take back program. So I think the more there is companies and service providers like them, more companies are going to be able to jump into not just having a resale platform powered by ThreadUp, right? They're going to be probably having these on their own, right? For example, we have Recurate, right? A platform that sets like peer-to-peer reselling in their websites, So it's like we need this post-consumer supply chain that it's gonna allow for more companies to be part of the circular economy, so we can together make a change. And
you're totally right. It's interesting because in general, brands as clothing companies, manufacturers, they're good at one thing, right? They're good at creating clothing and selling clothing. When we ask clothing brands to then be responsible for the second life cycle of those garments, it's honestly outside of their scope of traditional business.
Exactly.
And Carmen, I think you're totally right. As we start to see these secondhand marketplace service providers, it's in general, software as a service is called SaaS platforms, and what we're calling them now is ROS platforms, resale as a service, to doing exactly what you're saying, really do the heavy lift of the logistics of what it's going to take to streamline the resale process for the consumer to make it easier for them to resell and easier for the brand to support those initiatives.
Yeah. And not only that, it's also because we're talking about just resale, but what about the huge percentage of garments that we cannot resell, right? And that's actually one of the reasons why I started Making You, because throughout my years at Eileen Fisher, and it's fairly new, it's a baby for me. It's like a 1-year-old, and I haven't done much of, marketing around it because we're just kind of slowly building it. But basically, throughout my years at Eileen Fisher, I saw that a lot of companies just wanted to be doing what we were doing. But again, going back to that, you're a clothing you're a clothing brand. If you don't own your first life factories, why would you have to own your post-consumer supply chain, factories or systems to do that? So, that's when we're okay, we need to really offer a service, mostly focusing on what to do with the non-wearable garments,
So what does it do, Carmen?
So basically, for example, a company just can come to us and I have X amount of unsold inventory, right, in my warehouse, and I want to do something with it. Or maybe it's a company that has a take back programs, I have X percentage of garments that cannot be resold. So we sort the garments, we analyze it. We say these can be, repair, these can be remanufacturing, meaning it can be deconstructed and sewn back together at scale, right? So what people call it upcycling. I don't like that word, but it's we remanufacture garments at scale. Or maybe you have a large volume of certain materials that can be fiber to fiber recycling to be shredded back to a fiber level and spin it in a new yarn and make new garments. So we basically just deliver a final product to the company, right? So they're just literally give us a product and we give you back a product made from your garments that cannot be resold. So that's basically what we've been doing. We work with public school. We are working with small brands right now, but maybe in the future, we're just going to continue to grow. But so the whole point is we need not just to address the resale part of it. We need to address what we cannot resell. And that's what it's going to help us close the loop in this industry.
Yeah. The H&M Foundation has an annual Global Change Award, and the 2022 winners, there were 5 of them. I think almost every single one of them dealt with some level of fiber recycling, to your point, Carmen. So what most people may not know is that when you have a T-shirt and, it's beyond its usable life cycle, there's not very many processes right now that can actually functionally turn that T-shirt back into fiber, like a yarn or a thread, like fabric, that can then be remade into a new T-shirt. It's but this year H&M's Global Change Award featured 5 different companies that are trying to figure that problem out, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and that's really the future at scale, right? Here ourselves at Eileen Fisher, we are doing fiber to fiber recycling, right? Like our T-shirts that have cotton spandex or like silk, wool. Like we have partners in Guatemala, partners in Spain, and partners in Italy that they're helping us, kind of bring this huge volume of inventory that we have, shred it down, and make new garments from them. So where it is possible, the thing that it's right now kind of like fragmented is like United States is like years behind these other, countries on mechanical recycling, right? So you have to kind of like be shipping things around the globe to be turning them into new. But like you were saying before, we can't judge just because the system is not perfect, because the more we do it, the more we're going to learn it, adapt it, change it, and, economies of scale, maybe we bring that to United States.
Right. And I thought that you brought up 2 really good points, Carmen. One was, we have to be able to do these processes at scale, because when we think about it, we tend to consider the clothing industry in terms of our own closet. Like, oh, I don't own that many clothes. But if you think about your closet in aggregate of every single person on the planet owns X number of clothing, it's a huge, the scope of this issue is massive. And therefore, the solutions associated with this problem need to be able to scale very efficiently. Yeah. Because the second point that you brought up is that consumers have to demand it, right? The reason that we are where we're at right now is because consumers have been given solutions of low quality, low cost, fast fashion, and that's solving their clothing problems, right? And if we are trying to introduce solutions that are less environmentally impactful, it raises the cost. And so even though any initiative to move the needle is fantastic, when we actually start talking about walking back from the edge of global warming, we need to be able to find solutions that are going to, at scale, work, but then consumers have to be willing to pay for any associated increase in price. Otherwise, it's not a solution. So it's a complicated problem.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with education. And I think a lot of consumers don't understand that concept of, saving their money to buy this one piece rather than 5. So,
right.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, this is something I talk about pretty regularly on Clotheshorse, is how our perception of price has been completely skewed over the past few decades. Like, to me, I can step back and say $19 for a pair of hot pink jeans and gasp. But I also know that for most people, $19 seems totally reasonable for a hot pink pair of jeans. Maybe because they know that they're not going to wear them a lot, so they're calculating the cost per wear. I've definitely been guilty of that in the past. But I do think, to achieve true circularity, we do have to get product that is worth repairing, that we have relationships with, that, on our own, with our own possessions, that drive us to protect and care and repair and want to give it new life when it's no longer a part of our life. And unfortunately, where we are right now is that the bulk of clothing that's out there doesn't have a lot of value past a few wears. I mean, I've definitely been out with someone who said, like, oh, my shirt just ripped. It's no big deal. I was from Forever 21. I only expected to wear it once or twice. And it's like, wow, but it's going to sit in the landfill for 1,000 years, Let's take a moment to thank some of the incredible small businesses who keep Clotheshorse going via their generous Patreon support. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycle clothing using only reclaimed, vintage, or thrifted materials, from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Shift clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room, all while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Catch us at flea markets around Southern California by following us on Instagram at vino.vintage so you don't miss our next event. Gabriela Antonis is a visual artist and an ethical trade fashion designer. But Gabriela is also a radical feminist micro-business. She's the one-woman band trying to help you understand why slow fashion is what the earth needs. The one-woman band to help you build your own brand. She can take your fashion line from just a concept and do your sketches, pattern making, grading, sourcing, cutting, and sewing. The second option is for those who aren't trying to start a business and who just want ethical garments. Gabriela Antonis will create custom made-to-measure garments just for you. Her goal is to help one person of any size at a time, including beyond size 40. To inquire about this serendipitous intersectional offering of either concept, DM her on Instagram to book a consultation. Please follow her on Instagram and Twitter at Gabriela Antonis. And that's Gabriela with one L. Gotta get that spelling right. Dylan Page is an online clothing and lifestyle brand based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our products are chosen with intention for the conscious community. Everything we carry is animal-friendly, ethically made, sustainably sourced, and cruelty-free. Dylan Page is for those who never stop questioning where something comes from. We know that personal experience dictates what's sustainable for you, and we are here to help guide and support you to make choices that fit your needs. Check us out at dylanpage.com and find us on Instagram at dylanpagelife&style. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Find us on Instagram at Salt Hats. Gentle Vibes Vintage. We are purveyors of polyester and psychedelic relics. We encourage experimentation and play not only in your wardrobe, but in your home too. We have thousands of killer vintage pieces ready for their next adventure. See them all on Instagram at Gentle Vibes Vintage. Thumbprint is Detroit's only fair trade marketplace, located in the historic Eastern Market. Our small business specializes in products handmade by empowered women in South Africa, making a living wage, creating things they love like hand-painted candles and ceramics. We also carry a curated assortment of sustainable and natural locally made goods. Thumbprint is a great gift destination for both the special people in your life and for yourself. Browse our online store at thumbprintdetroit.com and find us on Instagram at thumbprintdetroit. High Energy Vintage is a fun and funky vintage shop located in Somerville, Massachusetts, just a few minutes away from downtown Boston. They offer a highly curated selection of bright and colorful clothing and accessories from the 1940s to the 1990s for people of all genders. Husband and wife duo Wiley and Jessamy handpick each piece for quality and style, with a focus on pieces that transcend trends and will find a home in your closet for many years to come. In addition to clothing, the shop also features a large selection of vintage vinyl and old school video games. Find them on Instagram at High Energy Vintage, online at highenergyvintage.com, and at markets in and around Boston. So So this is a question that comes up a lot. It's a hot topic out there for sure, because I know that we need to change our behaviors and our relationships with our clothing. But the pushback I get constantly is slow fashion, sustainable fashion is too expensive. So therefore, I'm just going to go buy from Shein. What are your responses to that, knowing that quality is going to cost more money?
Well, we've definitely learned that firsthand. We've done everything independently thus far. And what I tell the average consumer is, you don't have to buy from us. You can go to a thrift store. At least in the US, we have that, and that is accessible. That's what we did. You might have to take a little more time, but there's something there for everyone, and it's going to be cheap. And then it goes down to education. So it takes time to educate someone to understand that their money can be spent in maybe a larger way for a piece that'll last them a long time. That is maybe means something more to them too.
Yeah, for us, it's a totally different approach. It's a very a gentle, kind of intimate approach, and we have the privilege of being able to people all the time, like at the Rose Bowl flea market, they can be taken aback by the price, but they're very much moved by the artistry, and then the way that our garments are put together, and they can tell its quality, and so they're interested in hearing the story. So I think it's storytelling, and it's having the right people tell the story that people can relate to. On a human level.
I can talk also a little bit about the incentivization model. So when I started researching kind of how consumers are incentivized into certain behaviors, I came upon blockchain technology and read an article in Rolling Stone magazine where music bands were putting their albums out as what are called NFTs on the blockchain. And through smart contract technology, what happens when that music album gets resold multiple times, the smart contract auto triggers a royalty commission back to the band. And I was like, I wonder if we could use that technology to do the same thing in the clothing industry. So what my startup does is we physically tether every individual fashion garment to an NFT. And rather than it being like a cartoon picture of an ape, like most NFTs are right now, it's a picture of the clothing, kind of like what you would see on a traditional e-commerce platform, like pictures on the model, video, it has care description, measurements, all that stuff. So that when the person buys that NFT initially, it comes with the physical clothing item. You are able to add pictures and videos of your individual experience onto that NFT digital asset. So if you are a celebrity or an influencer, or you lead like an interesting, like niche lifestyle, there is some level of value add to kind of the provenance and the nostalgia associated with like this particular dress or this particular handbag has been to Paris and I carried it through the streets of New York, and here's the pictures and videos of me doing that. And then when I'm ready to sell that garment, rather than me, laying it down, taking a picture, having to write the description myself, all I have to do is go into my NFT wallet and hit resell, and it uploads to the brand's existing e-commerce website. So our business model is where we license our API technology to effectively extend a brand's existing e-commerce website into like a portion that is like this verified resale marketplace. And then, every time it gets resold, that smart contract auto triggers a royalty commission, not only back to the manufacturer, but every person who has ever claimed that digital asset into their wallet gets a portion of the proceeds as well.
Interesting.
And the thought process behind this is what happens when brands and consumers anticipate future royalties on their clothing choices? Brands are going to create garments that last beyond the first generation user because they want to get that margin multiple times. And consumers are going to invest in quality items, take good custodial care of those items, and then resell them into a community of people that are going to maintain that particular item in circulation. So that's kind of where we're headed with the startup.
Interesting.
I do love, you touched on something there that I think is like a pleasant side effect of resale, and a lot of these brands beginning to offer resale of their brands specifically, is that it incentivizes caring for your clothing, which sounds like a very obvious thing, but it is unfortunately not. I mean, most people don't have laundry skills. Most people don't understand, or I mean, they don't have the space or the time or the energy to hand wash and line dry or lay flat. And to be honest, we've all become so accustomed to clothes just sort of washing and falling apart that we just shrug our shoulders and move on to the next item, right? So I've noticed that the brands that I see with the most thriving resale communities, whether it's actually owned by the brand itself, like via Treat or how Eileen Fisher works, or if people are reselling like in community groups on Facebook, which is really common as well, that these are brands that people love so much and they are so committed to treating it properly. I just read a 20-minute essay about how to care for the sleeves on your Selkie dress so it's good for resale. And I love hearing that, because that's, especially when we're talking about maybe younger people, not something that a lot of us are thinking about or have been raised with, or and I like that a lot of people who invest in these brands, like really look at them as investment pieces, are treating them as an investment. Like you wouldn't buy your house and then never clean or repair it, because it would be one of the most expensive things you've owned. And I do think that both a combination of loving the brand and knowing that you invested some cash into that garment motivates you to care for it, right?
Totally. I mean, when I went from fast fashion in New York to luxury fashion in Hong Kong, again, it was this light bulb moment that said, oh, wow, there are clothing brands out here that are creating garments not to end up in the garbage, right? But
what an idea,
concept, right? In that time in my career, you know, I had been in New York for 10 years working with like Kohl's and Sears and Kmart. So, you know, it was really eye-opening, and it was like, okay, well, like, how do we kind of scale that incentivization model for people who can't or don't want to buy luxury items? And I think that the most straightforward way is incentivizing them into a resale profit model that rewards their choices. And it's possible now with the technology that we have. It's really exciting.
So speaking of investment pieces, I've always thought of Eileen Fisher as an investment, and I see that those garments really hold their value on the resale market, unlike a lot of other things where if someone can sell it for $5, it's a lucky day. And Carmen, I was wondering, you know, have you seen evidence that your customers really look at the clothing as a long-term investment with resale value when they're purchasing?
I mean, we don't have real data on that, but what we do have is customers that they're extremely loyal, that actually, because, so I'm going to say that, yes. So our customer is extremely loyal, right? And we get about 20,000 garments a month back from them. You know,
wow.
I know.
That blew my mind. I thought maybe 2,000.
No, like 20,000. You know, we produce around 2 million garments per year. So we still get a very small fraction of garments in comparison of what we produce. But where I'm going here is that our customer returns garments that they're sometimes 30 plus years old. And these garments are in still perfect condition that we can put back into the system to be resold, right? So also the reason why we get so many garments is because our customer has a lot of Eileen Fisher in their closets, right? Mm-hmm. So one person can return 5-10 pieces. And actually we just did a test, like in a whole weekend, we did double rewards. We got close to 50,000 garments in just 2 days. That was just insane.
Wild.
We were not waiting to write down that huge of a check, but but it proved that, they're still coming back to us. But so I don't have like actual data on that. But I wanted to mention also something else is that, the $5 coupon is beginning not to be enough. And that's why we did that test, right? Because there's a lot more platforms that they're easier for our customers to go there and get a lot more money for their cashmere sweater than $5, right? So we're really like looking internally what is the second life of incentivizing, our customers to bring back their garments? But I don't actually know if I 100% answer your question.
No, I think you did. I think I assumed just with my own experience with Eileen Fisher that people absolutely were looking at those pieces as long-term investments and not just something they were going to wear for their birthday weekend. No. So that was what I suspected. But I was thinking, Crystal and Natalie, you are actually like working with customers IRL on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Do you give them any sort of advice or education around how to make their garments last?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we have like a little printout, or I'll say it verbally, for garment care. And what we use is natural fibers. We don't ever buy secondhand like poly or synthetics. Most of what we use, the majority, like 90%, is cotton. Mm-hmm. So, and the textiles we use, and from the experience we've had so far, we know how to wash them ourselves. Everything we put out is washed and tested. And if it's, if it color bleeds, then we're probably just going to use it maybe for like a scrap patchwork project. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there's certain steps you can take, right? Don't wash as often. It's not necessary unless you do have like underarm stains or whatever. Spot treatment, hand washing. Dryers are a big, contributor to messing up clothes. So sun cleaning, vinegar, white distilled vinegar is your friend. It's just, and I think I'd say that all of our customers, and I think Crystal would agree, really want to know. Like they'll be like, hey, like I didn't really like understand how to do this. So like, how can I make this last longer? They really care for them, and they really like, you could tell they feel like they're special, and they want them to last forever. We've received many like sweet comments, just people saying, oh, I'm going to give this to my daughter someday or whatever. So yeah,
I love that.
It's lovely. It's lovely.
And I think, right there, that's not a mindset that many people have had for a very long time. I would say that the bulk of my clothes, probably in the 90-something percentile, are secondhand, with a big percentage of them being thrifted or bought on like eBay or Depop or Poshmark. And that wasn't always that way. Like working in the fashion industry, and I'm sure some of you have had this experience too, there's a lot of pressure, especially where I was working in buying, to always have a new outfit. And so you're always buying tons of new clothes. You build absolutely no relationship with them. They're fleeting, in and out. I've always been a big fan of reselling my clothes even before online resale was an option, because I'm very like cheap like that in a weird way. So I would always care for my clothes. Like, listen, if I want to get anything for this at the Buffalo Exchange, like I'm going to hand wash this, but I still had these clothes knowing that they weren't going to be around for a very long time. And ultimately, I can't even remember all of those clothes because their time in my life was so short. Yet I can go to my closet and find things that I've had for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think the fast fashion industry, living in this fast fashion era, has really changed how we look at clothing as a temporary part of our lives. So there's just not a lot of commitment to what happens next.
I've been thrifting, honestly, since the 90s, and it's been wild to witness the change in quality as the decades have gone on, because back then the stuff that was in the thrift stores was from 10 or 15 years prior, and it had the, U.S. made in U.S. Textiles Association union label, and the weight of the clothing and the quality of the fabric was just, it was there. It might have been kind of an offbeat silhouette, but I liked it. I thought it was cool. You go into Buffalo Exchange or a thrift store or, any one of these like low level consignment shops now, it's literally rags on hangers. It is such low quality. Everything is wrinkled. You hold it up to the light, you can look through it. It's ridiculous. And it's such a shame because it used to be different. I swear it used to be different.
Oh, totally different. I mean, one of the dresses that I've had for about 20 years is from Forever 21. Because even in like 2002, Forever 21 was better quality than it was by 2010. And I think, having worked on the buying side and seeing this all play out in front of me, we were subbing out fabrics. We were subbing out trims for something cheaper, right? You had to hit an even sharper price point than me. Yeah. So I'm sure you've got some story. I've got stories, but I bet you've got some even wilder stories. And so ultimately, I worked with all these incredible, creative, smart people in design, but their true vision never came to life ever, which must be an incredibly demoralizing place to be when you're a creative person. I wonder how does the industry reverse course on that and go back to making product that you could buy in the thrift store 10, 20, 30 years from now and still think it's amazing?
I think quality and really, I think the company has to trust their designers' artistic skills, give some more creative freedom. But I think it's quality, just firsthand looks and yeah.
I think the word should in the fashion industry can be a dangerously slippery slope because, if the JLo collection, for example, we had super tight margins, we cut corners on fabric quality, it looked good in pictures, and then you went into the store and touched it. And I remember at the launch, my mom was like, what is this? Like, this is not what I was expecting. And it took me, it was like a thud, I was putting stuff out there that the primary intention was a photo op. But when you actually touched it, it was rough or scratchy or see-through or just, garbage.
Poor fitting.
But here's the thing. If we start using the word should, then Shein is going to do it or Forever 21 is going to do it. It's not like these fashion brands are out there altruistically figuring out their business model. They respond to customer demand.
And I think the demand, should be shifting towards secondhand. The vintage industry is massive. We've been in it for a long time, and in our opinion, the thrift stores have changed over the years because there's more pickers, and these people, these vintage dealers, are single-handedly creating this industry. Curating, getting in the thrift store, getting all those good quality items out of there and then reselling them. That's, I think, in my opinion, there's less out there because there's more pickers and more people going in. So it's a good thing. You definitely see the Forever 21 slowly migrating in there. And now all these new fast fashion companies, you see that in the thrift store for sure. I always say go to the independent thrift stores because Goodwills and all these more corporate companies are going to buy out some of those larger retailers, and there's going to be a larger percentage in the store of fast fashion. But it's there, and there's more than enough for everyone. There's more than enough quality items still out there.
Not just the thrift store either. You can go to estate sales, flea markets,
swap meets, garage sales.
And we just hosted a clothing swap for Earth Day, and that was really, really brought people together. We had such a good feedback from that experience. People want to just do it again and again. So hosting that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was our first time doing that, and it was really cool to see. Everyone bought, it was a 10 item max, and they brought their high quality items that they're
that's
like,
a
oh,
good
I think I'll give
idea.
this up, and someone else might like it. There was, crazy stuff in there, really, really cool things like vintage and even designer. So
Amazing.
yeah.
I love the idea of limiting the amount of pieces that you can bring, because when we're working in like Web3 blockchain technology, there's this whole thing about like scarcity and rarity and how that has an impact on value. And when you limit the number of pieces that a person can bring to a clothing swap, it automatically like modifies the supply side and increases the value of the demand. And that's a really good way of making sure that people bring their best stuff. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think the antique and vintage industry itself is just, scarcity and rarity. So when people finally jump on board to that, oh my gosh, I think they love it, especially if they have their own personal style.
I agree. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this because I talk about this a lot, kind of debunk this myth that the rise in the popularity of shopping secondhand has ruined secondhand for everyone.
No way.
And it's not fair. And we're taking all the clothes out of the thrift store. I mean, we've already addressed that there's ample to go around. But especially you two, Natalie and Crystal, do you ever get pushback like that from people?
Like what exactly?
Like, oh, you're selling vintage or you're upcycling, you're taking it out of the hands of people who really need it. You're like ruining the thrift stores, that kind of
honestly, thing. I had a personal experience having to clear out my grandfather's house, and there's a whole nother industry, which is junk haulers. And it's insanity. I mean, the clothes are just literally put into bags and sent to the dump. So there is more than enough for everyone. And there's good stuff probably in all those bags that are going to the dump. So what needs to happen is like more people, probably the, secondhand dealers need to tap into that market. How do you access that stuff? So I don't think there's any, nothing's running out. There's definitely more than enough. And there's so many different avenues you could find it, especially in, California, and the city is ample secondhand materials that are out there.
No, but I think people are really appreciative that we are people have brought their family heirlooms, quilts that their grandfather had in their house, or their grandmother. Like I said, there's a lot of sentimentality surrounded with what we do. So, and especially because we've made so many clothes with vintage rice bags and flour bags and feed bags, this people really, it really resonates with them, and it really makes them really feel, so I think it's been a really good reception. We've never had anybody saying that we're, taking all the vintage, and there is some, like Natalie said, it's endless. So
it's interesting to think about how much the nostalgia associated with a particular item can add to its value.
Right.
I think when manufacturing was effectively offshore domestically, and everything that's coming out of factories is effectively the same thing. It might be a different color or a different shape or a different style, but everything that comes out of these mass market factories is effectively fabric plastic in a different shape or size. We really lost some of that kind of human touch element to it. And I think when we consider vintage items or secondhand items, there's a real opportunity to reposition and rebrand. This is not secondhand clothing. This is something from the archive. This is something that has led a life experience before it came to your hands, that imbues that physical object with a human touch that we have, kind of outsourced effectively. I love the idea of blending physical objects and technology to be able to like scan a garment and see the life that it has lived before it arrived to you. It just really turns the concept of value on its head, because no longer are we looking at a physical object and saying, okay, this has value because it's made out of this or it looks like this. It's like, this has value because like, look at all the cool things that this object did before it came to me.
That's what I love about the vintage and antique industry and the knowledge, the wealth of knowledge that these dealers and pickers have. It's a lifetime of research. So it's a beautiful thing to understand something, some history for any one piece of clothing or textile.
Mm-hmm. And I think that like Gen Z is leading the trend on that. You know, we see resale websites obviously gaining in popularity. Depop was purchased by Etsy in June of last year for $1.6 billion in a mostly cash deal. Like Gen Z, they don't have the hangups and reservations about secondhand clothing the way that boomers or even Gen X did. It's awesome.
It is. It's really, really cool. It makes me very excited about the future. Sure. It makes me very optimistic. So, you know, we're coming down the home stretch now. I thought we could just take a moment for each of you to talk about what you've done in the world of circularity, in sustainability at your current job that you're most proud of, and why.
I would say just the customer experience I'm most proud of, because I've been able to just meet so many people, and a lot of them have become like friends or creative collaborators. So that has been a real joy, and something that I like to keep my feet on the ground and work in my community, and so that's been very fulfilling for me to, you know, yeah.
Oh, I hear you on that. For me, it's very community, people focused. I think that's who I am as an individual. And so making those connections and building those relationships brings me some of the greatest joy.
Absolutely.
Right. And knowing that we're making them something that is going to last forever, and that they can pass on to their children, you know, if they have children.
I think for me, you know, this jump into tech from what had previously been a traditional fashion career is equally exciting and terrifying. And as I'm working with software engineers to develop our prototype platform, I think what I'm most excited about is actually getting it into the hands of consumers. So, you know, right now, blockchain technology and NFTs is at the very emerging stages of consumer adoption, but huge corporations and huge industry leaders in a variety of sectors are investing in this protocol. And what we're going to see is consumers becoming more comfortable with the technology adoption as we go along through time. And whereas the prototype is going to be tested by people who, you know, they have crypto wallets and they understand the concept of NFTs. And that in and of itself is a tiny community right now. I think that as, you know, blockchain technology continues to expand, it kind of goes back to the same thing that you guys were talking about. I'm excited about building a community. I'm excited about actually interacting with humans that see the benefit of what we're trying to do and be able to hear their feedback and really tailor the experience to their value system.
Totally agreed.
For me, I am very, I think the thing that I'm most proud of, or just very excited, is that we've been able to, you know, create systems that do address a lot of, at scale, on the damage inventory, right, that cannot be resold. because that's a huge percentage of inventory. And not only at a private company like Eileen Fisher, but like really create a company that it's going to be able to offer these at, as a service for multiple brands. So I'm just more into the designing systems, right, for solutions for these type of clothing. So just avoiding them to go directly to the landfill or other countries. So that's, yeah.
I mean, I think all of you should be really proud in the impact that you're making in your day-to-day work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you, Amanda.
A pleasure. Nice to meet you all.
If you're enjoying this episode, then this is a great time to remind you that my work here at Clotheshorse is made possible by the support of listeners like you, just like NPR, and these great small businesses. Please go give them your support. Blank Cass, or Blanket Coats by Cass, is focused on restoring, renewing, and reviving the history held within vintage and heirloom textiles. By embodying the love, craft, and energy that is original to each vintage textile as I transfer it into a new garment, I hope we can reteach ourselves to care for and mend what we have and make it last. Blank Cass lives on Instagram at _Cass, and a website will be launched soon at blankcass.com. Located in Whistler, Canada, Velvet Underground is a velvet jungle full of vintage and secondhand clothing, plants, a vegan cafe, and lots of rad products from other small sustainable businesses. Our mission is to create a brand and community dedicated to promoting self-expression, as well as educating and inspiring a more sustainable and conscious lifestyle, both for the people and the planet. Find us on Instagram at @shop_Velvet Underground or online at www.shopvelvetunderground.com. St. Evens is a New York City-based vintage shop that is dedicated to bringing you those special pieces you'll reach for again and again. More than just a store, St. Evens is dedicated to sharing the stories and history behind the garments. 10% of all sales are donated to a different charitable organization each month. For the month of April, St. Evens is supporting United Farm Workers Foundation, mobilizing farm workers and their organizations across the country to advocate for more equitable policies. New vintage is released every Thursday at wearstevens.com with previews of new pieces and more brought to you on Instagram at wear_st.evens. That's Wear St. Evens. Country Feedback is a mom and pop record shop in Tarboro, North Carolina. They specialize in used rock, country, and soul and offer affordable vintage clothing and housewares. Do you have used records you want to sell? Country Feedback wants to buy them. Find us on Instagram at Country Feedback Vintage and Vinyl, or head down east and visit our brick and mortar. All are welcome at this inclusive and family-friendly record shop in the country. Republica Unicornia Yarns, handmade yarn and notions for the color obsessed, made with love and some swearing in fabulous Atlanta, Georgia by head yarn wench Kathleen. Get ready for rainbows with a side of giving a damn. Republica Unicornia is all about making your own magic using small batch, responsibly sourced, hand-dyed yarns and thoughtfully made notions. Slow fashion all the way down and discover the joy of creating your very own beautiful hand-knit, crocheted, or woven pieces. Find us on Instagram at Republica_Unicornia_yarns and at www.republicaunicornia.com. Picnic Wear, a slow fashion brand ethically made by hand from vintage and dead stock materials, most notably vintage towels. Founder Danny has worked in the industry as a fashion designer for over 10 years, but started Picnic Wear in response to her dissatisfaction with the industry's shortcomings. Picnic Wear recently moved to rural North Carolina, where all their sewing and accessories are now designed and cut, but the majority of their sewing is done by skilled garment workers in New York City. Their customers take comfort in knowing that all their sewists are paid well above New York City minimum wage. Picnic wear offers minimal waste and maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. Cute Little Ruin is an online shop dedicated to providing quality vintage and secondhand clothing, vinyl, and home items in a wide range of styles and price points. If it's ethical and legal, we try to find a home for it. Vintage style with progressive values. Find us on Instagram at Cute Little Ruin. The Pewter Thimble is a curated secondhand shop based out of Rome, Italy. Owner Desiree Marie Townley has a background in costuming and makeup for dance and opera and focuses on dressing for the character you want to be in the world. Curated collections are dropped in a story sale and always have a specialized theme, like the color palette of Starry Night, the film classic Casablanca, and the children's novel The Secret Garden. Desiree works with local artisans, and pieces are rescued from markets and rehabilitated and resold with worldwide shipping. The Pewter Thimble is a collection of pieces that will have eternal style from the Eternal City. Discover more on Instagram at The Pewter Thimble. Thanks to all of the guests on today's episode: Carmen, Crystal, Natalie, Lacie, and of course, Laura. Thank you for working through technical issues and everything else and listening to my feverish questions, literally. I'll share all the places you can find them in the show notes. Please give them all a follow and see all the stuff they're working on. And while you cannot attend the Reworked Summit IRL, even I'm not going, there will be virtual opportunities. And additionally, if you live in or near New York City, please check out the Reworked Makers Market, which is happening on June 4th and 5th in Williamsburg. Lots, and I mean lots, of your favorite upcycling designers will be there. You can find out more on Instagram at Reworked Market. Okay, I'm going to go finish packing, water the plants, all the things I need to do before I leave town. And of course, feel sad about my lack of smell and taste. Hopefully by the next time you hear from me, I'll be tasting up a storm again. I'll be smelling all the smells, good and bad. And of course, I will be back next week with a regular episode. Bye.